Hi, my name is Matt Nasser.
I'm Bartholomew Bland.
I'm Claudia Baez, and this is How Does the Art World Work? And our guest today is my gallerist, Martin Friedrichs.
Hi.
Thank you. And thank you for having me in your gallery.
Well, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure to show your work.
I am so excited to have my first New York City show with you. And it has been a great show.
Mm-hmm.
We've had good reception.
The busiest opening we ever had.
Because I have a lot of friends.
Very important.
My friends came through. They all came to my
Were they
opening.
art world friends?
They're friends from everywhere. They're from, mostly my kids, the schools, my midlife crisis, going back to school myself. I mean, I'm old. I have a lot of friends. That's what happens when you are old.
I thought that when you're old, you have less friends, but you seem to gain friends as you move on.
Old. Right.
Exactly.
No,
So
I
I don't
am
think
old and I do have more and more friends, but I like people. I like all kinds of people.
I was going to say, I think the way that it came across and the way that you were greeting people, it was a very sort of genuine, it was more like a family party than anything else. It was like a really wonderful mix of folks. And like I said, we had, I think we had to send somebody out for more beverages at the end because it was such a success.
That's so great. So let's tell our audience, how does the art world work? How did I get to be with you, Martin? Let's tell them that. Because if I don't say that, then what am I talking about? What's the point of this whole podcast?
Well, a mutual acquaintance of ours mentioned that maybe you should talk to Claudia. I think you two would hit it off, and I think you would like her work, and she's looking for someone. And I said, sure, facilitate the introduction. And you came by the gallery and we had a brief chat. And I work a lot off of how I relate to the artist, almost as much as how I relate to the work. I have to love the work first and foremost. But if I feel like I can't relate to the artist on whatever level that might be, intellectually, emotionally, if that doesn't happen, then I find it very difficult to work with someone. I mean, that doesn't preclude me exclusively, but so that was an immediate reaction. And then the one thing that also facilitated the wonderful opening is that you're such a gracious hostess. And I came over to your apartment, and within about 30 seconds of looking at your work, I was like, well, it makes sense. We have to do a show. That was, I think if you spend 20 years in my case looking at artwork, very soon how much you relate to it, what you like, and whether or not it makes sense within your own gallery. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't fit in. That's rare. Where I would be like, oh, I love this work, but I don't think I can show it. But in this case, it was just I looked at the work and I thought, yeah, absolutely. And that's all that it took, really.
Very gratifying.
Very satisfying.
I'd like to give the audience a little context. We were in Tribeca, it's the premier area for commercial galleries in New York City, I would say. It has been for the past few years, all the galleries moving here.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned you've been working in it for 20 years. Maybe talk a little bit more about your journey to the most prestigious area of galleries.
We haven't
New
actually
York.
said the name of the gallery.
Oh yeah, that also could help with context.
Mystery.
Well, the gallery is named Friedrichs Pontone. It's myself and my partner Dominic Pontone, who also has a gallery in London, but this is a joint operation here in New York with its own program. And I originally worked for, I got a sort of non-traditional start. I was a temp in another art gallery. And they actually just asked me to help them move. And so I did. And then they sort of said, well, maybe you can do a little bit more. And do you mind doing art handling? And I said, well, what is that? And they were like, well, you do this, we'll tell you, move that over there. And I said, okay, sure, I can do that. And then eventually, they're like, can you answer phones? And I said, yes, I can do that. I've worked in a call center as a survival job. And then fast forward to me taking over everybody's job when they left. It was one of those places that actually had a wonderful climate where people didn't ever seem to leave. But when they did leave, I seemed to take over their job. And eventually I said, I don't want to be an art handler. I want to work in the curatorial side and the sales side. And so while I was working there, I went back to school, got my art history degree, which is one of the great secrets of New York, that most of the instructors are actually curators who, at some of the museums, I had my instructor for Islamic art was the assistant curator for photography at MoMA. Or their PhD students working in art history. And so got my degree. 3 years later, I curated a show at my gallery that I was working for, not my own gallery. Hired my old instructor to write the essay. Interesting enough, it came over 5,000 words too long. And then
you have your red pen out?
well, I said, I guess we can put a couple more pages in the catalog. And this was at a time when we still put out catalogs for every show. My boss believed in the printed matter. So I did that for 14, I worked there for 14 years. And then a friend said, hey, I know this gallery, they're looking to open a New York operation. Do you know someone? And I thought, well, yes, me. I did that for 3.5 years, and through the pandemic, through shutdowns, lockdowns, sitting in the gallery to make sure that everything was okay when there was a little bit of sort of maybe unrest in New York, which was widely overblown. But my Swiss bosses were like, can you make sure everything's okay? And then the idea germinated, it had been germinating for a while, that I should go out on my own. So I asked my friend who got me the original interview, what do you think of Friedrichs' gallery by itself? And he said, I think that's a great idea. And then I asked another friend, how do you feel about this? Do you think it makes sense? And he said, well, how do you feel about Friedrichs' Pontone? And I said, well, that makes even more sense. And looking back through my notes and my other things, I sort of discovered all these sort of plans we had forged in a backyard in Miami after art fairs, late into the night. So it sort of was a long time coming, but here I am. We signed our lease in April 2022. Did some renovations, and then sort of did a soft opening, did some more work during the summer, and then launched fully in September 2022.
You also, Matt, how did you start being a director of a gallery?
Trial by fire. I mean, I was thrown into it through La Mama, but I came through the nonprofit world. Mm-hmm. But these lines seem to be blurring more and more these days. We also did art fairs to get the word out for the gallery at La Mama Galleria and make connections. And it seems one of the...
And you also, like, when you get your artist, you also go with your gut feeling whether you like the person.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, now you have your own space. You don't have to work with people you don't want to work with. And that was a big reason why I left the nonprofit world, to not work with people I didn't want to work with.
And you work with people you don't want to work with.
Oh, no, I work every artist is special to me.
Oh, stop it, Bart.
Tell
hundreds
us the
and
truth. Hundreds.
Tell us the truth.
We've had some characters over the years. But I do think it's interesting, people, their willingness, particularly when you sort of get a bit of temperament, as we might say, people's willingness to burn bridges over a small matter. And it comes back to haunt them when they do that a few times. And, I've sat around with other curators and like, oh no, don't go near that person.
I had a situation where a friend of mine told me, like, what are you doing? Why are you letting this be like this? This is terrible. I was exhibiting, with... I'll just say it. I mean, with the gallery in Mexico, and the galleries were adorable. These young kids, they're so young and they're so adorable. I'm not going to go up to them and tell them, I don't like that. This looks terrible. I'm like, I don't. It's not a nice way to be like a prima donna. But
Well, I think that one of the great questions is, as the artist, you can probably get what you want. It's sort of winning the battle and losing the war, because
they're not going to invite you next
you
time.
may get the paintings hung the way you want them, or
but they'll never take you again.
But they will never take you again, and everyone who asks the curator about you will be like, oh, no, please stay away. And that, I think, if you do that a few times, that does come back to haunt you. And I've been on a number of selection committees, for instance, where people say, well, no, that's going to be a problem. This person's going to be a problem, and we don't really want to go in that direction. So it's interesting when that happens.
For our audience, there were two things that they have to take note of: be nice, and what was the second one? Oh, and it's all about friends. I mean, it was my friend that recommended me to be here. It was through a friend.
Well, I mean, I think that at the same time, it's not just being nice. You can ask for what you want in a nice way, or in a constructive way, or how can we make this work? And you can get pretty far down the line, asking for something authoritatively and quietly and pleasantly without, throwing yourself around the gallery.
Can we now talk about, since we're in front of my work, can we talk about my process a little bit?
Yes, we can. Well, I was going to say, related to, your stable of artists, your profile of the gallery. Do you mostly show figurative work? And
I think we do have a strong figurative program, but our selection process isn't solely based on that. I think we look for a sure hand, a facility with material, and a sense of confidence that the artist portrays in their work, in their process. However, that is manifested. We have a stable of Korean artists that work in very different media. But in general, what I always love is this sense of, I know I can immediately see where it's going. I know I can see where this artist is going. I can, it's accessible to me. Not easy. Then what I mean by accessible, I know it's obviously I'm just one person, but accessible to me means I can get something from it. I can, it makes sense to me. It reads to me. But we don't exclusively do figurative. I will, however, if it's an artist's process is too similar to someone else that we have, I'll be like, I'm very sorry, but I don't think it's going to make sense. It might make sense in a group setting or something, but when it comes to solo shows, that becomes difficult because it can bleed into each other. Obviously, there is, if you look sort of at art history, you look at sort of these schools, and you look at sort of that there's always sort of similarity in process and similarity in approach, or at least retroactively we shoehorn them into that. But in this case, it wasn't. It was the conversation about the work. It was first you look at the work and you see, okay, I love this. I want to, and then you try to understand why you love it, right? It's the emotional, and then comes the intellectual part of why you love it. And
the other fun thing was that your partner Dominic gave me a show in London.
Right. Well, that was a wonderful sort of coincidence. It
was just
exactly
amazing.
The great one.
I guess I have to die soon. I just had
that's what we should buy now. That's
exactly.
Telling me
Exactly.
I've had my glory days. That's
so we've never
said
said the name of the show. So what is the name of this exhibition?
The other thing that happened is with Dominic and Friedrich and Martin, they have a gallery that is a similar situation. Like here, there's an upstairs and a downstairs, and there was this downstairs artist, and she came, and I didn't really know like what my role was with her. She was lovely, and hi, and she's having a show down there. But all my people came, and they all stayed up here. A few of them must have gone down, if they felt like being intrigued. But I wasn't telling them, you should go look at the artist downstairs, because I didn't even know who she was. So in London, it's the reverse. Upstairs was this fabulous man, Richard Harrison, with some super fun paintings, and I was in the downstairs. So he didn't have to send anybody down. Luckily, I had a few London friends.
The name of the shows.
Okay, the name
Not
of the
one,
show.
but two shows.
Okay,
One- yeah.
this show is called My Brother's Mind, and the show in London has many different titles. It got a little confusing because I would call it What Could Have Been, but it's based on Bob Carlos Clark's images, and this one is based on my brother's photographs. And what I find could be an inkling of what my brother was thinking when he was photographing these girls, because he was very obsessed with girls and of a certain age and a certain poses. And I've looked at them and they've intrigued me throughout the years. And one day I saw this movie because I just felt like the need to see the movie, because the movie is called The Night Porter. And I've always told my husband, on many occasions, I tell him, I'm going to chain you to the bed. And like, it's a really crazy thing to say to someone. And I keep saying that to
Out
him.
of context, yeah.
And then I realized, where does that come from? And I said, I have to see The Night Porter again. And The Night Porter is a movie with Charlotte Rampling and Dirk Bogarde that is very perturbing, very disturbing. Definitely not a movie that you should see when you're 15 years old. My brother must have been 13 and I was 15 when we saw this movie, which is totally inappropriate. And we were sitting in a plush seat with a torta de los guajolotes, which is this amazing like pulled pork and a Coca-Cola here. And my parents were crazy. They took us to the movies. They had friends that were picking the movies. It was just an insane story. But so The Night Porter, basically, he chains her to the bed. He does that, Dirk Bogarde. And there's a moment in time where Charlotte Rampling, she's beautiful, she's young, she's thin, very thin, because she is a war victim. It's a very confusing situation. But there's a moment in time when I see Charlotte and I could tell that's the moment that my brother was. His brain just, So I tackled the movie and I tackled his images, and it was all very intense for me, and hence that's the show.
Well, tell us a little bit about your brother's career. I mean, what kinds of photography was he doing, and how long was he doing it
He started
for?
working for Joel Brodsky in the 80s. Joel Brodsky was a photographer that took the picture of Jim Morrison, just like that. And from that, he learned from Joel everything. He was very devoted to photography. And then he started doing music videos. And he was a precursor of the music video. He did many music videos that, to this day, they're being ripped off. Savage Garden, Bon Jovi. He got a music video award for Hootie and the Blowfish. His music video career is intense and very extensive. And then he always had on the side, he had his Leica on his arm, and he photographed cities, places. And then he also had this kind of private practice where he photographed these girls. So it's all like a mishmash. And then the last work that he did was called Posted. And he was posting on Instagram a girl and an image of a city or a town or scrambled eggs, fried eggs, or a car. So he would juxtapose these two images and see how many likes he would get. And so it was called the Posted on Instagram, and he called it 162 grams. I don't know. He was very conceptual, my brother, and very bright. Not like me. I'm not.
I think in the context of your work, and I feel this might be one of your most personal shows that you've ever done, and your most personal body of work, because it's so intimate about, it's very hard for anybody to really ever know another person, but you're going to the places of exploration, and especially when it comes to a family member where then juxtaposed with a movie that, as you described, is not, I discovered it's not suitable for viewing on a plane. When we started working on this show, and I thought I need to watch this movie, and I got into about 3 minutes, and then I had to quickly close my laptop because the people around me would have had a really interesting opinion of me.
Oh, no.
But I think it's such a it's a very very vulnerable show because you're really, you're going into some, and the movie has very dark places, and it deals with a victim relationship and a perpetrator relationship during the Holocaust, and all these things, and you're examining some of these works, and and it's amazing because people of a certain age will come in and they'll recognize the frame of the movie right away. Oh, I know that's from. They might not even know what the show is about. They might not even know but they're relating to the image right away. And I think it's in terms of challenging yourself as an artist, I think it's incredibly brave to go to these places where you're examining that relationship and to look at that
It took me
work.
a long time. It took me a long time to be able to look at anything that my brother left behind.
Mm-hmm.
When he died, I mean, everybody grieves differently. My daughter moved into his studio apartment where he lived in Williamsburg, and she wouldn't leave. And she surrounded herself with his clothing, and I mean, we couldn't get her out of there. She abandoned her dog and her husband. She didn't have children then. But it took me from 2016 that he died till, I don't know what year I started working on this, but it was like a good 8 years or something to be able to even look, We had done a few things with him, but not. It's hard. It's very hard. Grieving is a strange thing.
Complex in its own. It's not just those kind of dynamics. And so is all of the work in this exhibition derived from your brother's images?
It's either from my brother's images
or from the film?
Yeah, exactly.
Considering you've had those two shows going at the same time, and they're both very sexual in nature, I mean, in terms of people's encounters and things, how do you think the two series relate?
They don't relate, the series. I go one series and then I go to another series. But that fact that there's some sexual situation undercurrent going around, that's just who I am.
You don't think, but you don't think that they relate? I mean, you spoke very movingly about the series that you're having in London, about your experience as a young girl and being in the sort of innocent romantic encounter.
That was a real event that happened to me. Well,
Right.
I mean, watching a movie was also real.
So you've never
I guess
chained
they're
your husband to
both
the
real.
bed?
I haven't, no. I still think about it.
Art, you want art to imitate life, or the other way around? Life to imitate art? Okay.
I guess so. I'm very confused. I mean, it's very blurry at this point, and I have so many dreams also that sometimes I don't even know what the reality is. I'm telling you, I'm losing it. But the show in London is based on something that happened to me when I was a young girl. I came out of a party, and my boyfriend at the time protected me from the rain with his raincoat because we didn't have an umbrella and it was raining. And I got in the car, and my mother, my father, and my two brothers were in the car, and we had to drive from one side of Mexico to the other side of Mexico. And it was really a long road. I mean, it was a long drive, but it felt like an eternity to me. My father was so mad, and he literally just scolded me the whole way because he had seen me with my boyfriend. And it just completely destroyed me.
Get thee to a nunnery, as they say. I want to relate to...
Enough about me. I wanted to talk about painting.
Well, also, okay, we want to talk about painting as far as the process.
My main objective in making a painting is to be like Franz Klein. Franz Klein just has a canvas and he goes, shoom, shoom, shoom. There's 4 marks, and they're completely unconscious marks. He didn't think about it. You see so many of these black and white paintings, and they're not, if it's not a Franz Klein, it doesn't work. It's it just doesn't work. Don't even go near it. The way to really, so right now I'm working on another body of work, another series that has nothing to do with my sexual problems, I hope.
Well.
I hope.
It always
Never
comes
know.
out unconsciously. That's
Right.
But my idea is I'm working wet on wet, and I want it to just be completely unconscious. I have the image. The image is a given. So that's always something you have to work with. But I'm looking at my paintings here and I'm thinking, which one was successful, which one wasn't successful. Then I use the oil stick sometimes to like refine or to do something else. But that's what I'm meaning. I mean, basically, the ones that work for me are the ones that were not labored on. That were just,
That you move through quickly.
yeah.
And I wanted to relate sort of for you to make it easier to sell work for like in an art fair at the gallery, to have this sort of story for artists that are working and striving to have representation. These sort of ideas of like this show, this concept of this show, or you're working in series of stuff, to have that story is very important for you to latch onto, to communicate that to the public.
I agree. I think it helps tremendously to sort of explain to collectors and to prospective buyers and prospective collectors what the origin story is. To use an overused phrase, but what the background is behind it. But I think in general, what I found, especially at art fairs, when it comes to comes to buyers, it's sort of similar to how I described my process in falling in love with Claudia's work, which is at first you have to like the work, and then you start. Then of course the intellectualizing comes, which is, okay, can I afford it? Do I like the story behind it? Because sometimes that might. So you have to sort of, as a gallerist, have to also sometimes make sure you don't share too much, or sort of see what the collector, what they respond to and how they respond to it in some ways. But I think having the background is obviously critically important in explaining the work. But at the same time, if the work can't stand on its own without any background behind it, without any explanation, then it can't be successful. And we took Claudia's works to Expo Chicago last week and sold several pieces to people who saw it on the wall, said, I really like this, I'll come back, how much is it? And then within an hour later, rang their credit card and wrapped it up, and they took it.
That's the dream.
That's an art dealer's dream, absolutely. Not a lot of conversations, not a lot of emails, and did you get my last email? And oh, by the way, this is now sold, and that sort of thing, which is the usual bane of every art dealer, yeah.
Well, this has been great, and I'm very grateful.
We're
Thank
very
you,
happy to see the show.
Martin.
You're closing this Saturday, right?
Yes,
This is
Saturday
the last week of the
closes.
show.
And London's up for another week after that. So,
Yeah, there's still a week in London.
Yes. And we'll be
Thank you
sorry
so
to see
much.
the paintings that are sold gone, and we'll hold on to one or two that are that will remain with us for a little bit longer, and look forward to the next thing.
Thank you so much, Martin. It's
Thank
been
you very
such a pleasure, fun, wonderful time for me.
Thank you. Congratulations, Claudia.
This is Claudia Baez, and this is how the art world works.
I'm Matt Nasser.
I'm Bartholomew Bland.
And I'm Martin Friedrichs.
Thank you.
Bye.